Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world. I'm extremely pleased to welcome you on behalf of the International Trade Center, the Swedish Institute for Standards, and the International Standards Organization to the launch of the landmark ISO International Workshop Agreement on Women's Entrepreneurship, Key Definitions, and General Criteria on this occasion of International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day to all of you. My name is Vanessa Eric-Bogbo. I'm the Chief of the Sustainable Inclusive Value Chain section here at the International Trade Center. And I also had the privilege of chairing this important ISO International Workshop Agreement. Before we begin, a housekeeping reminder, please keep yourselves on mute and your videos disabled if you're not one of the speakers. We have a power-packed agenda over the next hour, and we're going to kick it off now. Are you ready? I welcome Mr. Sergio Mujica, the Secretary General of the International Standards Organization, to deliver his opening remarks. Sergio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good day to all of you. It gives me great pleasure to participate in this event and to celebrate with you the International Women's Day. Today, we celebrate the achievement of women and recognize the essential value of their participation in every aspect of society. At ISO, we are fully committed to advance gender equality. Together with our members, we aim to raise awareness of the disparity of opportunity and rights for women. There is no room for complacency. We're still a way from achieving gender equality, and getting there remains an uphill struggle against not only societal norms and attitudes, but also sometimes even laws that belong to another era. That's why we have chosen International Women's Day to launch new guidance that will contribute to changing the way that we think about the role of gender and women in a space often dominated by men. ISO's new International Workshop Agreement, IWA 30.
Sergio, you're on mute. Okay, there we go.
Sorry, now?
All good now.
All right. So ISO's new International Workshop Agreement, IWA 34, provides key definitions and general criteria for women's entrepreneurship. This new publication was developed with the extensive participation of women representing the widest range of technical expertise and cultural viewpoints. In particular, I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize the contributions of all of those present here today who made this groundbreaking initiative possible. A special thanks to the Swedish Institute for Standards, SIS, and the International Trade Center, through the SheTrades initiative, and more than 300 stakeholders who participated in the development of ISO IWA 34/2021, including networks of UN Women, the UN Global Compact, the International Labour Organization, the International Cooperative Alliance, and the Financial Alliance for Women. Our collaboration with the ITC and SIS is set to continue beyond the initial development of this IWA. We want to bring it to life through its national adoption by ISO member countries. In this way, it will become part of the working language of business administration and regulation, and will help address issues of inequality, particularly in the emerging economies. And of course, we remain committed to our capacity building initiatives that support this work. All in all, this document does something far more important than setting rules. It gives us a vocabulary and it defines key concepts unambiguously. We need to ensure that our words and actions carry the weight of their good intentions. To continue to progress, to see women prosper without obstacles in areas like business, we need the unified action and support that can only come from an open and honest conversation. The ability to exchange ideas, to understand and to define with clarity what it means to be a woman entrepreneur, are at the core of this international workshop agreement. ISO IWA 34 is a foundational block in building a better society, and we should be proud of the contribution that ISO and our partners have made. This new publication represents the achievement of just one of many initiatives included in our strategic commitment to addressing gender issues in international standardization. I am proud that today, on International Women's Day, we have played a small but very significant part in enabling long overdue conversations about gender equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sergio. We do look forward to continuing our productive partnership as we work to promote the adoption of the IWA. And now I welcome Pamela Coke-Hamilton, the Executive Director of the International Trade Center, to deliver her welcome remarks. Pamela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vanessa. Happy International Women's Day, everyone. Before I begin, allow me to thank our co-hosts, the International Organization for Standardization and the Swedish Institute for Standards, for joining the International Trade Center in the celebration of this groundbreaking achievement in the history of women's economic empowerment. The launch of the ISO International Workshop Agreement on Women's Entrepreneurship, Key Definitions and General Criteria, ISO IWA 34. This year's theme for the International Women's Day is #ChooseToChallenge, and this perfectly reflects the intention of the ISO IWA 34, which is to tackle a long-standing problem in the national and global ecosystems of women's entrepreneurship. I would love to support and source from women-owned businesses, but little to no idea who they are and where to find them. That is the ostensible reason many public procurement and corporate value chain decision makers give when challenged to purchase from and empower women-owned businesses. In response to this challenge of visibility, several efforts have been made to pool, train, and give visibility to women-owned businesses, including through ITC's own flagship SheTrades online platform and annual SheTrades global conferences. However, without a universally agreed definition of what it means to be a woman entrepreneur, progress has been mixed. Stakeholders within and across countries, be it governments, standards bodies, business associations, financial institutions, and corporations, have been using different terms to refer to a similar concept or different definitions to refer to the same term. In some cases, they do not have a definition at all. This lack of a common understanding of woman entrepreneur resulted in not only a cacophony of different criteria and terms across national and international systems, but also a fragmented landscape that prevents women entrepreneurs and their businesses from realizing their true potential. For example, without global consensus on terms and definitions referring to women's entrepreneurship, institutions and policymakers cannot compare gender disaggregated data in a meaningful way. Secondly, governments have less of an evidentiary basis to create policies targeting women. Thirdly, institutions will be less able to identify gaps in the women's entrepreneurial ecosystem to develop targeted initiatives aimed at increasing women's access to capacity building, finance, and new markets. Fourth, women have to meet diverging criteria through often time-consuming procedures in order to access training, finance, and public and private procurement opportunities. The International Trade Center's SheTrades initiative decided to take on this ambitious task in 2019. The government of Sweden supported this bold initiative. In collaboration with SIS and ISO, we began work on the International Workshop Agreement in 2020. But alas, the COVID-19 pandemic happened and threw a spanner in our works as in-person consultations could no longer be held. Thanks to the flexibility, diligence, and collaboration of our partners at ISO and SIS, we were able to turn a minor inconvenience into a massive opportunity for inclusivity. In a short span of 4 months from June to September 2020, ITC SheTrades and SIS organized 16 informal stakeholder consultations involving 342 international experts experts from 49 countries. Special thanks to institutional partners and allies, the UN Global Compact, Financial Alliance for Women, UN Women, International Labour Organization, and the International Cooperative Alliance, who helped us promote the IWA process among their networks and contributed their expertise in shaping the draft text. During the informal consultation phase, we were also able to tap into our in-house expertise from ITC SME Trade Academy, who helped us develop a virtual learning platform and repository to help participants access key documents and tutorials and establish a common foundation of understanding on the subject matter. And finally, during IWA workshops 1 and 2 in October and December last year, we had 183 international experts from 57 countries. Most importantly, the IWA would not have been so successful if not for the feedback and illuminating debates provided by each and every one of the participants. Many of you I know are here with us today. It is because of your openness to share, disagree, compromise, and empathize with one another that we're able to reach a global consensus amongst hundreds of stakeholders from all corners of the world. The success of ISO IWA 34 truly exemplifies the endless possibilities we can accomplish together if we set our differences aside, listen to and work with one another, and stay focused on our common goal. That is to break down barriers to women's economic empowerment. Before I end, I must extend a huge thank you to the government of Sweden for sponsoring this effort, and the International Organization for Standardization and Swedish Institute for Standards for the incredible support and leadership they have demonstrated throughout the consultative and drafting processes. ITC looks forward to working closely with you in the coming months as we seek to translate the IWA into policies, standards, and data. Not to forget the IWA leadership team from ISO, and I don't want to massacre people's names, but I think it's Josie, Noelia, and Rachel. And from SIS, Maria, Osha, and Nicholas, and ITC, of course, Vanessa, Judith, Virginia, Edison, and Jen. Vanessa, you have done an incredible and brilliant job of holding the integrity of the IWA process as chairperson. Thank you very much. And of course, a massive thank you to each and every participant who contributed to the development of the International Workshop Agreement, be it during the consultative process or in writing. What we see in the IWA is a reflection of each of your individual voices, expertise, and wisdom. On International Women's Day 2021, my encouragement to us all in these uncertain times is to focus on what you can do and where you can effect change. Continue making the deliberate choice to challenge barriers to gender equality and to break them down together, just as we have done here on this critical issue of setting the record straight on defining women's entrepreneurship, so that next year, this time, we will have even more glass ceilings shattered and milestones achieved for women in business. Thank you very much, and I wish you an incredible
Thank you so much for those invigorating words, Pamela. And indeed, the ISO IWA 34 was really an exciting outcome of partnerships among hundreds of institutions and experts who gave of their time and their ideas freely. Without many of the experts that we have, I think, with us here today as well, this wouldn't have been possible. We prepared for years for this, and not even a global pandemic could stop us coming together at all hours of day and night to deliberate on the definitions and criteria for women's entrepreneurship. Indeed, it enabled us to do so more inclusively, as you rightly pointed out. I will certainly never forget the hours of interesting and robust debates and the passion with which they were delivered. Numerous organizations from around the world are already contacting us to let us know how they plan to promote the IWA, and I'm certain that it will be a game changer for women's entrepreneurial development. Now, to a panel session to go into a bit more detail about why ISO IWA 34 is such an important document and where it can take us. I'm joined by a group of some of the experts who participated in the development of the IWA. Ms. Adriana Sierra Leal is the Program Officer of Women's Entrepreneurship and Refugee Livelihoods at the ILO. Ms. Angela Joo-hyun Kang is the founder and executive president of Global Competitiveness Empowerment Forum in South Korea. Ms. Aurora Boots Jyotina Gathia is the chairperson of the Philippine Women's Economic Network. Mr. Said Jafali is principal consultant at the Association for Women Entrepreneurship Development in Azerbaijan. Dr. Evgenia Dovitsa is the regional representative for Europe at the International Cooperative Alliance, and Ms. Virginia Littlejohn is the CEO and founder of Quantum Leaps in the US. You can see even from this panel, the diversity, geographic and sector and so on of some of the experts that participated in the discussions. So let's start with Virginia. Virginia, my very good friend, I've known for many, many years. Virginia, you've been an absolute trailblazer in breaking down barriers for women entrepreneurs over the past decades, most recently through your work with us in developing this the technical note that led up to the ISO IWA 34. Based on your research and interviews in preparation for the IWA consultative processes, what can you tell us about the current landscape surrounding definitions on women entrepreneurship, and what have the consequences been?
I'm going to start with the history, Vanessa. I organized the world's first global best practice conference on women's entrepreneurship. That was with the OECD in Paris in April of 1997. We brought together policymakers, academics, and women entrepreneurs from 35 countries. The #1 recommendation was, and I quote, improve understanding of the contributions of women entrepreneurs in OECD transition and developing countries to economic growth, international trade, and job creation through strengthened data and statistics about women-owned SMEs. Also, increased statistical harmonization across countries in order to facilitate comparative analysis. The participants at this extraordinary first OECD conference in 1997 realized just how crucial it was to strengthen data and statistics about women-owned SMEs if we were going to be able to build the women entrepreneurial community, and to develop common definitions so that we could move toward harmonizing statistical systems across countries. This would enable national and international organizations to compare themselves with other countries, to implement evidence-based policymaking that would address gaps that were identified in the enabling environments for women's entrepreneurship, and to measure progress. Yet for 24 years, countries around the world developed their own definitions, percentages of ownership, and other criteria concerning management and control for such terms as women-owned businesses, abbreviated WOBs and pronounced WOBs, women-owned small businesses, WOSBs, pronounced WOSBs, women-owned SMEs, WSMEs, pronounced WSMEs, women's business enterprises, WBEs, pronounced WEBs, plus female founders, women or women-founded companies, and many other definitions. Some governments or organizations defined women-owned as majority-owned, which might mean 1 share more of ownership by a woman or women. This term was sometimes used in the finance industry and some government agencies, including some ministries in the UK. Alternatively, other governments and organizations, especially those focused on supply chains and procurement, required 51% ownership by a woman or women in order to be certified as a WEB WASB, and several other definitions and pronunciations, most starting with W. This model has been prevalent in corporate and public procurement in the United States and various other countries, particularly countries affiliated with We Connect International's excellent corporate certification program, which is active in more than 46 countries. Yet some industry sectors and organizations, particularly some focused on finance, decided on more than one definition. The International Finance Corporation, or IFC, and the WeFi program, Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, at the World Bank use two definitions to define a woman-owned business: 51% or more ownership by a woman or women, or 20% or more ownership by a woman or women, and one woman or more as CEO and or COO, with 30% or more of the board of directors being women where a board exists. But finally, nearly a quarter of a century after the historic OECD conference in 1997, two organizations bravely rose to the challenge and decided to actually define women-owned businesses and women-led businesses: the International Trade Center and the Swedish Institute of Standards, with ISO's backing and support. So why is this important? Pamela mentioned a number of critically important issues. Adoptions of common definitions will enable governments to develop programs on access to markets and many, many other initiatives, will enable national statistic agencies to accurately compare their progress with other countries, enable researchers to recommend evidence-based policymakers that will help governments and international institutions to better spend the projected trillions of dollars earmarked by the public and private sectors and international sectors for spending on equality and entrepreneurship in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, due to be implemented by 2030. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, to enable stakeholders providing financing, capacity building, access to markets, and reskilling to help fuel the entrepreneurial recovery from the COVID pandemic. Our collective global effort to build a bolder, better future for entrepreneurship in order to overcome one of the greatest challenges women entrepreneurs the world have ever faced. So, if we were all in the same place and the same time, instead of 60 different countries, instead of being virtual, and if I had a bottle of champagne, I would offer a toast to the International Trade Center, the Swedish Institute for Standards, the International Organization for Standards, and the government of Sweden for getting us to the place where statistical harmonization of women entrepreneurial data will no longer be just a dream, but at long last will become a reality. Congratulations, everyone. We are celebrating trailblazing on International Women's Day, and very much more is to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Virginia. Indeed, this is really such a groundbreaking moment. And, you know, you've just described, you know, what I would call scrambled egg. And it's no wonder it took us a quarter of a century to put that egg back. We didn't think that we could recreate an egg from scrambled egg, but it looks like we just have. Now I want us to shift our focus onto how ISO IWA 34 can be used to push forward a more inclusive agenda across business ecosystems. In the document, we've developed definitions and criteria for a number of terms: women-owned business, women-led business, women-led cooperative, and women-led informal enterprise. First, I'd like to turn to Angela. Angela, could you share with us a bit how you plan to use the IWA for your institution, the Global Competitiveness Empowerment Forum, and what opportunities lie ahead?
Thank you very much. Congratulations on the landmark achievement again. As a person who participated in 2 former workshops, I would like to share my opinions in 3 points. First, my reflections on the IWA process. Second, the role of a Women's Business Association. The last, benefits of agreed definitions and criteria. First of all, I can summarize my reflections in 3 keywords: openness, consensus, and then professionalism. As we see and then also experienced by the audience who participate in the workshop and then consultation process, our process was very open and engaging to include many multi-stakeholders, despite of the challenges of the virtual format and then other COVID-19 related challenges. International consultation is a really challenging group intelligence process, but consensus-based decision-making and all the effort to gather different opinions made a participant feel very inclusive. Thank you to the considerate joint leadership of ITC and SIS. Also, I was impressed by the professional approach to pursue precision, such as looking for convincing rationales in every case and making difficult decisions not to include the items that need more consultations. Second, I would like to emphasize the 3 possible roles of a Women's Business Association, the hearts of this, IR process beneficiary. As a disseminator, a capacity builder, and then a catalyst. Some standards of the IWA, such as the percentage of the women board of directors is a bit high from the perspective of the countries in lower ranking of the gender gap index. But it's very meaningful to set up a benchmark that we pursue. Therefore, I think the dual role as a disseminator and also a capacity builder for leadership development by the Women Business Association is very important. Also, it was really good to see that the IWA reflected a sectoral difference in the independent section, for example, such as the R&D driven industries like high-tech and then biotech that needs a long-term contracts. This kind of a flexible aspect will benefit both general and then sector-specific women's business associations, like the IT Business Women's Association. Because in South Korea, there are many kinds of women's business association, not only one. When they collaborate with the various industry associations to increase more business opportunities, the women entrepreneurs members will get benefits. So the catalyst role of a women's business association will be very important. Last but not least, I would like to highlight benefits of agreed definition and criteria and the importance of empowering women with two South Korean examples. In South Korea, women-owned business should be certified by government to get benefits of preferential treatment quota in public procurement, allocated over 5% of the general goods contract and over 3% of construction contract. Social enterprise should be certified as well in order to get additional points in public bidding tenders or exemption from competitive tender bidding in public procurement. According to the Korean Social Enterprise Promotion Agency, supporting all stages of social enterprise for 14 years, the percentage of women social entrepreneurs is about 50, the half of new startups in 3 consecutive years until last year. So as a closing, I would like to emphasize these 3 points once again. And then finally, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Virginia, who helped me to participate in this Iowa process, and then recognize her notable leadership leading W20's Women Entrepreneurship Working Group for several years. Since the W20 Secretariat of this year during the Italian presidency is AIDA, the Association of Women Entrepreneurs and then Business Women of Italy, I sincerely hope for many potential achievement in collaboration between ITC and Women 20 with my best wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And of course, you can count on us to continue to support the W20 as well. I really like the way you highlighted the IWA as having the potential to provide a benchmark for us to work towards and almost as a driver for us to do better. I see a question that in the comments that I wanted to highlight. I hope I can find it again. I can't, but it from Miguel Singh, who asks if this will be a standard just on paper and not implemented by all organizations globally. And I think this is where the work is. This is something that Sergio highlighted in his remarks. We're counting on all of you, and we as well will be doing our part to look at how we can support stakeholders around the world to adopt this IWA and to make good use of it in their work. I will go across to Aurora in the Philippines. Could you tell us a bit about how you would use the IWA for the Philippine Women's Economic Network and what you've gained from this process? Aurora, are you there?
Thank you, Vanessa. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to say good evening from the Philippines and to thank the organizers for the opportunity to participate, although I must admit that I was only able to participate in one session, but nonetheless, I thought it was a very interesting discussion of views and opinions. So to answer your question, I'd like to begin by first describing what PhilWen is, or the Philippine Women's Economic Network. It's actually a coalition of women's organizations. So we just organized this recently from existing women's organizations, and so far we have 6 members comprising a representation of women in startups, small, medium, and large enterprises. We also have women in the workplace, whether middle managers, senior executives, CEOs, and board directors. So we do have a wide representation of women's participation in the Philippine economy. And I think much has been said about the fact that the absence of clear and universally agreed upon definitions has actually impacted on our ability to, or has imposed challenges on the entrepreneurial ecosystem for women, not only in terms of research, data gathering, evidence-based policy making, capacity building, and access to finance and markets. So now that we have IWA, the definitions, I believe our network will be able to utilize it in many ways. As you all probably are aware, the Philippines has had good gender parity performance. And despite the fact that 50% of our, at least 50% of our small and medium enterprises are owned by women, and of which 99% of our economy is actually represented by medium and small and medium industries, women still need to be supported, okay, so that they can have access to the tools and resources which will enable them to be successful in their businesses. So from the PhilWen standpoint, I see many uses for the definitions that have been established. For one, I think as a network, as a coalition of business organizations, it's quite important for us to identify who our beneficiaries and constituencies are, okay? Given that we have different types of women's organizations, we could actually use a definition to even sharpen our gender lens as to who we are serving, okay? For whose interests are we serving and what do we stand for? It also will allow us to also delineate the scope and coverage of the different organizations that are represented in our coalition so that we avoid possibly duplication and redundancy. It will also allow us to recruit other women's organizations who support the same advocacy as we are, which is really women's economic empowerment, and allow us to be more inclusive so that we're able to cover all types of businesses, whether led or owned by women. In fact, as of today, we don't have a cooperative, a women's cooperative group, nor do we have a group which represents the informal economy, which is one of the types of businesses that have been defined in the document. It will also allow us to be able to identify really the issues and challenges that are faced by women businesses and develop policy recommendations which we can then submit to the regulators and the government authorities. Having this definition will allow us to collaborate with other organizations with the same advocacies because now we have a common understanding of terms. We all will become starting from the same page, knowing who we want to serve and who we want to support. And as has been mentioned earlier, allows us also to benchmark ourselves, whether globally, regionally, or even locally, with respect to similar organizations. I'd like to raise those some possible challenges that we might face in implementing this. Virginia mentioned that it took 24 years it was 24 years ago when this idea was first initiated. I just hope that it will not take us 24 years as well to implement and get, consensus or agreement to this new definitions. But I understand also from the comments of Sergio at the beginning that I'm not sure whether I heard it right, that we will be encouraging or requiring perhaps international organizations and other countries to adopt such definition for purposes of trade, international trade. So there will be really an issue of is whether it will be binding or non-binding. Of course, each of the countries have now come up with their own definitions. In the Philippines, we do have a definition as well, which has been set by the Philippine Commission on Women, but there has to be now a need to align with the national terminology with IWA, which could be a challenge. In our case, I'm speaking from the Philippines, we'll also need to identify who might be the overseeing such process. We do have a Philippine Statistics Authority, which compiles statistical data. And to date, we have not really had the, enough or maybe limited this aggregated data, which would help us in identifying and recommending policies. And of course, well, there will be a need for information campaigns, creating awareness to this definition, especially as it involves not only the public, but as well the private sector. And that's possibly where networks such as us can play an important role. There will be need for consultations, and we will be more than happy, to be involved and organize, consultations towards an efficient and successful implementation of the adoption of these new definitions. And of course, the data collection system will need to be established because of the need to conform to the way the definitions have been determined. But nonetheless, I am confident, and to be honest, I do feel happy and gratified that finally, we will all come together to agree to a definition. And I see more benefits, that will come from out of this exercise. And I'm looking forward to, really increasing entrepreneurship among women, because we do not have to discuss that any further, how significant a contribution women's entrepreneurship can play in any country's development. Thank you
very much, Aurora. Thank you very much for those fantastic comments. I'm actually going to, since we have the privilege of having the Secretary General of ISO with us, I'll actually ask him if he wanted to reflect a bit on some of your comments and the rollout of the IWA. Sergio? Yes,
absolutely. Thank you very much for those excellent comments. And there was also a question in the chat about, is this going to be another, standard on paper? What do we need to make it happen in reality? What we have done here together, working together, is to create definitions by consensus. But now we need to make it happen in reality. So this is not the end of the journey, it's just the beginning of the journey. At ISO, we create global solutions by consensus, but then it's an invitation to excellence. And it's up to all of us to make it happen in reality at the national level. So we will be inviting all the 165 ISO members to nationally adopt this standard, this IWA. So what makes sense for us here in this room, it also will make sense at each and every one of our countries. But again, that is not the end of the journey. We need to promote this. We need to create incentives for our companies and industry to use this standard, so we can note in practice, we can see a difference in real life. So once again, it's the beginning of the journey, but I'm hopeful that working together, we will make it happen.
Thank you very much, Sergio. And I want to turn now to discussing cooperatives and the informal sector. Time is not on our side, so I'm going to ask you, Evgenia and Adriana, to keep your comments a bit shorter, maybe 3 minutes each. Evgenia, you're working with the International Cooperative Alliance. Cooperatives function quite differently from enterprises. What are some of the thoughts you have about applying the IWA in the context of cooperatives? Over to you, Evgenia.
Okay, thank you. I will keep it sweet and short. Let me start by saying that the ISO IWA is of great importance for the cooperative sector, as it has incorporated the broadly accepted definition of cooperatives according to the ICA statement for the cooperative identity. So it further strengthens a common language when it comes to women and cooperativism. Before thinking of sector-specific and region-specific strategies, when it comes to operationalize the IWA from the part of the ICA, the priority is the promotion, visibility and dissemination of the document that we have produced, both internally to its membership base, which is more than 300 organizations, coming from more than 100 countries, but also externally to reach to every cooperator out there and to the rest of the world. So how are we going to achieve that? First of all, it will be included in the agenda of the Gender Equality Committee of the ICA and also promoted by other general means such as social media channels, webinars, the ICA events, but also use the tools that the ICA has been able to produce for cooperatives. For instance, Copedia. Copedia is our own search engine covering all sources related to cooperative entrepreneurship, from guides, videos, publication, documents. So the finalized document will be indexed in the Copedia as well. One small personal comment, it would be very interesting to see 1 year from now, if we all gather together and hopefully vis-a-vis, to monitor and map the thus far progress that we have achieved. So to keep it short and sweet, as I said at the beginning, I think the goal of the IWA goes hand in hand with the message of the Gender Equality Committee of the ICA for the International Women's Day, which is cooperatives can be a tool to reduce socioeconomic injustices faced by women. We look forward to further promote and develop cooperatives and women out there, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Evgenia. That was short, succinct, concrete, fantastic. Thank you very much. And I was in such a hurry to move our discussion along, looking at the time, that I omitted to call on our good friend Saeed Jafali from Azerbaijan to talk a little bit about the IWA in the Azerbaijani context. So Saeed, grateful if you could be as succinct as Evgenia was. The floor is yours. We go back to looking at enterprises.
Thank you, Vanessa, for your question. I once again would like to congratulate all the women and thank them making the world a better place for living for all of us. Coming to your question, Vanessa, I would like to mention that in 2017, Azerbaijan government adopted a special program for the development of the SMEs. This strategic program pays special attention to women and prioritizes the development of the women entrepreneurs. This is because women are underrepresented in the economy, and virtually all of women entrepreneurs belong to SME group. However, there is somewhat ambiguity in the implementation of the program, as the program doesn't define what is considered woman entrepreneur. As in many countries, there is also no written definition of the woman entrepreneurship in our regulations. In the private sector and society, there are multiple definitions, as in other countries. Some consider as a woman entrepreneur as a person who is the CEO of the business. Some consider as who has the majority in the business. So there are varying views. Until now, government has initiated several programs for the development of the women entrepreneurs. However, the issue of lack of definition hinders the implementation of the programs. This especially hinders the elements of program in terms of providing preferential and preferred access to credits and loans and tax exemptions. According to our surveys, these are the things that women entrepreneurs in Azerbaijan need most. In order to address the issue of lack of definition and assist the government in the implementation of the program, we decided to do some research and some brainstorming, and by very nice coincidence, we learned about the International Workshop Agreement, IWA, and started to actively participate in the process. After the conclusion of the IWA, we started to draft the legislation and guidelines on women entrepreneurship, where we used IWA as the main reference document. These guidelines and draft legislation will be submitted to government organizations, government bodies and committees, where they can draft policies. This is because we did this because the final output is based on the consensus of hundreds of experts and comes from very well established organizations like International Standards Organization and ITC. And I think the adoption of definition and criteria presented in the IWA will create more enabling environment for addressing the underrepresentation of women in business activities in Azerbaijan, especially in terms of providing financial access and initiating preferential programs. Ms. Aurora mentioned many benefits. I don't want to mention these benefits to repeat, to save the time. But at the moment, we think that main benefits will come in terms of providing financial access and initiating preferential programs. At the end, I would like to thank all the organizers of IWA for very excellent organization. That was really excellent. That I don't know what good word can express this. And I would like to especially thanks to Vanessa and Maria among the organizers, and thanks to Miss Virginia for preparing excellent technical notes that helped a lot for us in preparation for the workshop and in drafting our legislations.
Thank you so much, Said. And that's so exciting that you're already applying this IWA in the Azerbaijan context. I wasn't aware, so that's a fantastic gift for this International Women's Day for us. Thanks for sharing that. So we're going to wrap up this panel with Adriana from ILO, who is going to give us a bit of a sense about how this IWA could play out in the informal sector. As you all know, this is a particularly crucial sphere for women's entrepreneurship. Adriana, are you there? You have a few
Hi, Vanessa.
To close the panel for us.
Perfect, thank you. I'll also try to keep it short and sweet. Thank you for having me. And yes, certainly the ILO has its own definitions and ways of measuring and understanding the informal economy. And the consultative process involved in the IWA really resulted in definitions that are both aligned, but that can also complement existing ILO frameworks. And when discussing women-owned informal enterprises, I find that the focus on management and control reflected in the IWA is particularly relevant and useful. So when we're looking at formal enterprises, establishing that ownership and leadership is a very simple, straightforward process. There are documents and evidence of women's positions, there are shares, and there is clear ownership. However, when we look at informal enterprises, establishing ownership and leadership is a challenge. There are no registrations, there's no supporting documents, and there's often no paper trails. So how do you identify then what is a woman-owned and woman-led enterprise? And this is when decision-making power really becomes incredibly important. And so the IWA 34 emphasizes management, or the ability to make day-to-day and strategic decisions, and also control, so the power to direct management and policies within an enterprise. And so this expanded focus of what it means to be a woman who owns or leads a business really can help make visible the very important and often underrepresented work that women in the informal economy perform, including both in terms of job creation for themselves and also for others. And this is particularly relevant as we're seeing many sectors and regions where women continue to be highly represented as informal entrepreneurs. And what this can mean for programming and for projects, I want to give you two brief examples. The first one, I think that Virginia and Aurora really covered the points here. When you have a definition, it enables you to measure and it enables you to understand the challenges of women entrepreneurs and women-owned and led businesses, particularly in the informal economy. And we work a lot with, for example, business development service providers and financial service providers. And so by enabling them to really understand some of these challenges, to have a definition, and to be able to target a specific segment, we're also enabling women entrepreneurs to access tailored services and to also facilitate that access. So having that definition and having that knowledge is really important for women in business to access those key services. And I want to leave you with a final example of what this IWA could mean for women operating a micro enterprises. We often talk here from the project or organizational approach, but what does it mean for a woman who has a micro enterprise? When we often implement projects, we really tailor and market our services and trainings to women entrepreneurs or women business owners, women business leaders. But what we found is that in many places, women don't identify in this way, and especially women who own a micro enterprise or who operate in an informal economy. They often see this as an extension of their livelihood strategy and not necessarily as owning or leading a business. But what this IWA can do with this focus on management and control without really looking at kind of paperwork and ownership is it can really change the self-perception of women who own and operate a micro enterprise and really consider themselves as businesswomen and as entrepreneurs. So with that, I'll stop there, short and sweet. Thank you, Vanessa, for having me, and thank you for everyone who participated in such a consultative and fantastic process.
Thank you very much, Adriana. 35 minutes is just not enough to have this sort of conversation. We need to have many more of these discussions, and we will have many more of these discussions in the coming months and years. Thank you very much to our keynote speakers, Sergio and Pamela. Thank you very much to the panelists. And also thank you for the contributions from the hundreds of experts and organizations who participated in the development of the IWA, to the Swedish Institute for Standards for the close working partnership over the months, to the sheer expertise and dedication of the SIS team. I tell you, it was quite remarkable what we saw. I've rarely seen anything like this before. And to our partner ISO also for the close collaboration, and we look forward to continuing the work. And of course, to the government of Sweden for funding this important work. Clearly, as Sergio pointed out, this IWA is just the beginning. There's a lot of work to be done. We hope that all of you will use this IWA to facilitate your work, and we're here to champion you and support you. The ISO is available, the IWA is available on the ISO website already, so please do log in there and download it. It's also on ITC's publication website. Now, finally, allow me to pass the floor to the Chief Executive Officer of the Swedish Institute for Standards, Ms. Annika Andreasen, for the closing remarks. Annika, the floor is yours to close this important session.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you. And thank you to all speakers and panelists for your insights and perspective in this important question. I believe our discussions here today really goes to show how important this workshop agreement is in our effort to promote and strengthen women's entrepreneurship. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for persons like Virginia Littlejohn, starting this in '97. Now, 25 years later, we have tools to set goals and create plans to make change. And we heard Said saying that it's already starting. And we at SIS are very proud to have been part of this and making this happen. The IWA is a groundbreaking, Sergio said, and I agree. It's the first ISO deliverable which exclusively focuses on sustainable development goal number 5, on achieving gender equality and empowering women. It's also the first workshop agreement to be developed digitally. This digital process was, of course, forced upon us by COVID-19, but turned out to be a real success. It enables a very broad participation. It was more than 350 experts from 77 countries that registered to the process. And I actually think that this digital process makes the world a bit smaller. We get closer to each other. More than half of these experts was active in influencing the content of the agreement. This is amazing numbers. I would say we haven't seen such at SAS in Sweden. And we at SAS strongly believe that this is just the beginning. During this process, we have heard many more ideas on other ways that ISO can support in making our world more gender equal. That is why we today, on the International Women's Day, are launching a survey to collect input both from the fantastic network this process has given us, and from other actors on how to move forward. And I urge you to make your voice heard by giving your input on this survey. We will have the link shared on the chat, so please look in the chat and also circulated after the workshop. We are looking forward to your ideas, and please share the link in your network so we can get all the input we can get. Based on your inputs, we will start discussions with ISO, ITC, and other key partners on the best way forward to take the next step. We hope that this will lead to many interesting new collaborations, all with the purpose of strengthening women and moving us closer to gender equality. Unfortunately, today, the Swedish Minister for Foreign Affairs couldn't be represented here, but we are, of course, grateful to the generous support they have given us in this work and the process. I think this support provides my country's commitment to the cause of promoting women in business. Last but not least, I would like to thank everyone that made this possible. Our partner ITC, thank you Vanessa, both for sharing, but to all the participating in the work, and the rest of the team. I'm sorry if I pronounced your names wrong, but Judith Fessenhaye, Edison Yap, Gem Arbo, and Anna Vasudevan. I'm sorry about the pronunciation, and everyone else. From SIS, we are proud to be a part of this project, and I know that the SIS team with Maria Gustafsson, Åse Lyngstad, and Niklas Videll has worked very hard to make this EVA happen. And of course, the most important last, all our experts. We couldn't have made this without you. In ISO, you are the true heroines and heroes who dedicated your time and effort in making the world better for everyone, one little step at a time. Thank you so much. And finally, happy International Women's Day, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika. Thank you all. Happy International Women's Day. Onwards and upwards. Thank you. Have a fantastic rest of the day.
Thank you.